right, let's go ahead and get started. So first off, hello, my name is Grace Fuller. I serve as the manager of International Experience and Engagement here at the International Services and Engagement Office. And we want to welcome you to our pre-arrival webinar, Applying for Your U.S. Visa. Now, before we get started, we just want to congratulate you. So these webinars are a collaboration between our office, the International Services and Engagement Office, often referred to as ISEO, as well as the Division of Graduate Education and Postdoctoral Affairs, or sometimes referred to as GEPA. And we just want to warmly congratulate you on your admittance to UC San Diego. We are so excited to welcome our newest cohort of Tritons and to have you with us here today. So like I said, my name is Grace Fuller, she, her pronouns. I serve as the manager of international experience and engagement. And I'm going to pass it over to some of my colleagues to introduce themselves as well. Over to you, Jessica.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jessica Boyle. I am an international student advisor in the International Services and Engagement Office, and I use she, her pronouns.
Hi everyone, my name is Mary Hogan. I use she, her pronouns as well, and I am the Director of Graduate Admissions in the Division of Graduate Education and Postdoctoral Affairs. Very glad to be here with you today, and I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Shauna.
Thanks, Mary. My name is Shauna Slaviota. I also use pronouns she and hers. I work in graduate education and postdoctoral affairs as a student services advisor. Part of what I do is plan welcome events for new graduate students on campus. So I'm looking forward to getting to work with you all as you start your programs.
Lovely, lovely. So a little snapshot of how we'll spend our time together today. We do have some reminders from graduate admissions as you all are accepting your offer of admissions. We're very excited. Then we're going to go into a little bit more detail about what exactly it looks like to apply for your F1 or J1 visa stamp. We'll finish by touching on approaching deadlines and reminders, as well as upcoming webinars and additional resources. And as always, we will allow time at the end of this webinar for some open question and answer. Some reminders. So you are in listen only mode, which means you can hear us, but unfortunately we can't hear you. So the main way that you will interact with us during today's webinar is through the Q&A feature on your Zoom menu bar. So you can go ahead and admit questions at any time throughout the webinar, but we do ask as possible to kind of save those questions to see if some of those might get answered through the content. And then we have that dedicated space at the end. Finally, we are recording, so you will be able to access this webinar recording as well as previous webinar recordings at inewstudentwebinars.ucsd.edu. This is also the place that you can register for upcoming webinars, so it's a great way to access this information. And this is just a friendly reminder of kind of what that Q&A feature will look like on your Zoom menu bar, on your control panel. And as a reminder, if for some reason we're not able to get to your question today, you are always more than welcome to reach out to our office. So if you go to icontact.ucsd.edu, you will be able to get in touch with us and we will do our best to answer your question. Even if we are not the office, we will connect you with the right people and the right information. And with that, I'll hand it over to my colleagues in the Division of Graduate Education and Postdoctoral Affairs for some reminders on your first steps.
Okay, so a few reminders from graduate admissions. So you all have already logged into your applicant status portal. And I know that because you've seen your decision. So that is how you access your applicant status portal. So if anyone ever has issues accessing their portal in the future, or forgets their login information, you can always email gradadmissions@ucsd.edu, that email address listed at the bottom of the slide. But it is important that now that you have seen that you've been admitted to UC San Diego, that you remember to go back into your applicant status portal and first of all, fill out your decision reply form if you have not already. So you'll see logging in, you'll see decision reply form with a little red X next to it if you haven't completed it. And if you have already completed it and said like, yes, I'm coming to UCSD, there will be a green check mark. Please also be sure to note if there is a statement of legal residence form listed below the decision reply form as a to-do item. This form is not required for all programs, so if you don't see it listed, there's absolutely no action for you to take on it. So don't panic if you don't see it there. But if it is listed, it is something that you are required to fill out. So please be sure to do so if you intend on accepting your admission to UCSD. It's also important to note that most students are provisionally admitted at the time that they receive their admissions offer. So meaning when you applied to UC San Diego, you were not required to submit official transcripts or official certificates. And so it's really important that you, in your portal, go back to that section and see like, okay, what else is required of me in order to finalize my offer of admission? There is a lot of information in your applicant status portal, and we ask that you read it carefully. There are details around dates for like deadlines for submitting official documentation for students, and this likely applies to most of the folks in this webinar. Who have attended and earned degrees from institutions outside of the United States, you are required to submit a WES course by course ICAP eval. All of these details are in your applicant status portal, but you will need to work with WES, and everything is linked in your portal to create an account and submit all of your required material for your specific institutions that you've earned degrees from, if those are outside of the United States, directly with WES, so that you can then work to have an evaluation completed. It is then sent to UC San Diego, and we then are able to review it in a timely manner and get your admission finalized. So make sure that when you're in your applicant status portal, if you have any questions whatsoever on the requirements that are listed specifically for you, that you email gradadmissions@ucsd.edu. The admissions team is here to help, and we are so happy to answer your questions. And, you know, we really hope that you are excited about your admission to UC San Diego, and that if you have any questions whatsoever, you'll reach out to us. And as Grace said, if we are not the correct office or we're not the best suited to answer your question, we'll be sure to connect you with the office that can. Awesome. And so this is a snapshot of what your applicant status portal looks like, or yours will look like a version of this. So again, applicant status portals are person specific. So, you know, at the top, it'll say, welcome to your applicant status portal, and then it will list your name. It'll list the forms that you see here. So we see here a green check mark and a green check mark next to statement of legal residence. Again, if those are required of you, well, the decision reply form is required of everyone. So make sure that you go in and actually fill it out and say, yes, I'm coming. Or if you do not intend, or you decide to not attend UCSD, you will need to say, no, thank you. It's really important to complete your decision reply form, because if you do not and you intend to come, you may A, miss the deadline that your department has communicated with you for a response, and B, if you intend to come to UCSD and you don't fill out your decision reply form, you are not going to receive a personal identification number, and you also won't receive your UC San Diego email address. And these are important. You'll see UCSD PID at the top of this page. You won't receive that information until you complete your decision reply form and say, yes, I'm coming to UC San Diego. Once you do so, it can take anywhere from 2 to 7 business days for that PID and email address to generate. So it's important to, you know, get the ball rolling so that you can start checking off other to-do items here at UCSD to prepare for your arrival. And then again, there's this section pending admissions documents. So yours will list specifics here for you. It's all completely responsive to your academic history. So follow all instructions for you that are listed under pending admissions documents. The below on the screenshot is just an example. And then over on the right-hand side, you'll see a section here for admitted students. And these pages link to the GEPA website, and they are full of really awesome and important information. So what to do immediately, it'll give you a snapshot of what you need to keep in mind and, you know, stay on top of. Shauna is putting these into the chat as well. There's a section before you arrive on campus, when you arrive on campus, and then a page dedicated specifically to international students. Again, if you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to our office at gradadmissions@ucsd.edu or reach out to ISEO. We're here to help, but we definitely want to make sure that you get the information that you need and complete all necessary to-dos in order to be able to take steps forward in preparing for your time here at UC San Diego.
All right, wonderful. And just as one last reminder before we get into the content of today's workshop, in addition to all of these great resources provided by Graduate Admissions, we also have the inewstudent.ucsd.edu website. So this website is built specifically for new international students at UC San Diego. So you can see here, this is on the left-hand side, the homepage that it will take you to. And then based on some of your identities, you can choose different modules and you'll receive information that's specific to you. So for example, many of you will choose the graduate students, master or PhD, and then it will take you through step by step what it looks like to apply for your F1 or J1 visa. So after today's webinar, this will be a great website to refer back to be like, oh yeah, what was that one link, or what were those funding requirements, or something like that. Then move on to preparing for your arrival, and then finally what to do upon your arrival. So this is a great website to refer back to as well, specifically talking to the international piece of your student journey. And with that, I will hand it over to my colleague Jessica to go into more detail about what it looks like to apply for your F1 and J1 student visa.
Awesome. Thank you, Grace. All right, so we do have a lot of information to cover today. I'm going to try to move through it as clearly but as quickly as possible because we do want to save time at the end for questions. As Grace mentioned, as a reminder, the information we're going to go over in today's webinar can be found on our inewstudent.ucsd.edu website. We are also recording this webinar, so the recording will be posted in about a week, and you will be able to come back and refer to this. So I encourage you to just listen, watch the slides, and we're gonna go ahead and dive in. So if you joined us last week, this is hopefully a familiar slide to you. Here at the International Services and Engagement Office, we break the visa process down into 6 steps. And those steps are requesting your visa certificate of eligibility, the Form I-20 or DS-2019 from our office, then using that document to schedule your visa interview. Step 3 is then attending that visa interview. Step 4, you receive your visa stamp back from the embassy or consulate, and you then have the documents you need to plan your travel to the United States. Step 5 is arriving to the US, which involves moving through customs. And then step 6 is to check in with our office so that we can activate your F or J status. Last week, in last week's webinar, we covered in depth how to request your Form I-20 or DS-2019 from our office. And today we're going to be looking at these next 3 steps in the visa process. As a reminder, If you have not yet requested your Form I-20 or DS 2019, you can do that now. iPortal, our services request system, opened yesterday. So please do go to iportal.ucsd.edu and submit the appropriate new admit request to request your Form I-20 or DS 2019. Instructions on the documents you'll need to upload to that request and how to submit that request are at our inewstudent.ucsd.edu website under step 1. So I do encourage you to review those instructions before you get started on the request. All right. So let's talk about step 2. Once you have received your Form I-20 or DS 2019, how do you go about scheduling your visa interview? Scheduling your visa appointment involves 2 tasks. You will need to submit the DS-160, which is the online non-immigrant visa application, and you are also going to need to pay what's called the SEVIS I-901 fee. So let's look at each of these in a little more depth. So the DS-160 is the official application for non-immigrant individuals to apply for a US visa. The DS-160 includes having to pay a $185 US visa fee. It is also sometimes referred to as an MRV fee. You will need to review the instructions on the website for the specific US embassy or consulate you plan to interview at, and look specifically for instructions on how to apply for a non-immigrant visa. That consulate or embassy's website will direct you to fill out the DS-160, and they will also have specific instructions on how to pay that visa fee. If you do not know which US embassy or consulate is closest to you or where you'll be interviewing yet, you can go to usembassy.gov, find your country, and under your country, you'll see a list of the US consulates and embassies in your country. The reason we do encourage you to make sure you visit your local US Embassy or Consulate's website, read through the instructions on applying for a non-immigrant visa is it does take approximately 1 to 2 hours to fill out the DS-160 if you have prepared beforehand. So you want to make sure you know what documents and information the application is going to ask of you. You will need to have your passport and your Form I-20 or DS-2019 in front of you while you're filling out this application, because the application is going to ask you for specific pieces of information that you'll find on those documents. So I want to quickly point out what some pieces of information are on the Form I-20 or DS-2019 that you will need to refer to when you're filling out the DS-160. This is what the Form I-20 and the Form DS-2019 look like. As a reminder, the Form I-20 is the visa eligibility document for the F1 visa category. The Form DS-2019 is the visa eligibility document for the J1 category. So one of the things that the DS-160 application is going to ask you for is your SEVIS ID number. And if you are applying for a J1 visa, it's also going to ask you for your J1 program number. That information can be found, as you see here, respectively on the screen, where the red boxes are on each of these forms. Another thing the DS-160 is going to ask you for is the field of study and zip code that is on your Form I-20 or DS-2019. You'll find this information kind of in the middle of both forms in the program of study information box or section. The field of study may not be exactly what the name of your degree program here at UC San Diego is, and that is okay. That is actually very common. The field of study and zip code, which is the corresponding number assigned to that field of study, these are categories that the US government uses to classify different fields of study or programs of study in the United States. And so the name of the program at UC San Diego that you've been admitted to may not exactly match what you see printed on your Form I-20 or DS-2019 in this space, and that's okay. The field of study is the category that the US government has assigned to your degree program at UC San Diego. The DS-160 is also going to ask you for the contact information for your international advisor. Now, here at UC San Diego and the International Services and Engagement Office, you do not have a specific international advisor who is assigned to you. All of our advisors are able to provide general advising and guidance. So what you can do when you get to this section is you can look on your Form I-20 or DS-2019 for where the signature of the international advisor is, and just use the name of the advisor who issued your document. You'll find their name again in the red boxes where you see her on the screen. You can also provide our office phone number and our office email. And as a reminder, in addition to being able to find that on the recording of this webinar, we have this information under step 1 at our inewstudent.ucsd.edu website. All right. So once you've successfully submitted the DS-160, you're going to be brought to this confirmation page. It has a barcode. Please make sure you save a copy of this page for your own records. You will also need to print a copy of it and bring that page to your visa interview. Following successful submission of your DS-160, when you get to this page, you will then be able to follow the consulate's instructions to schedule your visa appointment with that specific consulate or embassy. All right. So the other thing you need to make sure you do before you go for your visa interview is pay the SEVIS I-901 fee. This is a different fee than the visa fee that is associated with your DS-160 application. The SEVIS I-901 fee is required by the US government anytime someone opens a new F or J record. So as a new international student, when you are issued your Form I-20 or DS-2019, our office has essentially created or opened a new F or J record for you, and therefore you are required to pay the SEVIS I-901 fee. Similar to submitting your DS-160 application, once you have paid this fee, you will be shown a confirmation receipt page. You need to save a copy of that for your own records. You're also going to need to print it and bring the hard copy with you to your visa interview. You'll note that you do not need to have paid this SEVIS I-901 fee in order to schedule your visa interview. However, when you go for your visa interview, you do have to show proof that you have paid this fee. And we find it takes the SEVIS I-901 system about 3 business days to sync with your FRJ record and show that you have paid this fee. So please make sure you don't forget to do this. Make sure you pay this fee at least 3 business days, not 3 days, but 3 business days in advance of when your visa interview is scheduled for. The consular officer will need to see proof that you've paid this fee in order to actually move forward interviewing you. So it's really important that you remember to do this several days in advance of your visa appointment. And then a quick tip, if you are a citizen of Canada or Bermuda, you are actually not required to apply for an F1 or J1 visa stamp. So you do not need to fill out the DS-160 and schedule a visa interview. You do need to still present your Form I-20 or DS-2019 at the US border when you are entering the US, and you will still have to pay the SEVIS I-901 fee and show proof that you have paid that fee. But you are not required to actually obtain a visa stamp. If you are a citizen of Canada or Bermuda, I encourage you to go to travel.state.gov and search Citizens of Canada and Bermuda and read more about your specific entry requirements, as they're a little different from most other folks who are looking to come to the US under FRJ status. All right. So that is step 2, scheduling your visa interview. Let's take a look now at step 3, what to expect when you actually attend that interview. All right. So in advance of your visa interview, you want to make sure that you have gathered these documents. They do need to be hard copy printed. You will not be able to show electronic or digital documents on a phone or computer. You need to actually bring the hard copies with you. Your passport. And make sure your passport needs to be valid for at least 6 months after the program start date that is printed on your Form I-20 or DS-2019. You need to bring your Form I-20 or DS 2019 printed and signed by hand. Remember that the Form I-20 and DS 2019, you cannot electronically or digitally sign it. Bring your DS 160 confirmation page. That's the page with the barcode showing that you submitted the visa application. You will need to bring proof of payment for both the visa fee, that's the fee associated with the DS 160, and also the CVIS I-901 fee. Something to note is that in many cases, you will pay the visa fee as part of the DS 160 application process, but some consulates and embassies require you to pay the visa fee at the time of your interview rather than at the time that you submit that DS 160 application. So again, this is where it's really important to make sure you've reviewed the instructions on the specific website for the consulate or embassy you will be interviewing at, and specifically their instructions on how to pay that visa fee. If you don't pay it as part of your DS 160 application, you'll need to be prepared to pay it in the way they have told you to, probably at your visa interview. Something else to pay attention to is you may need to bring a passport photo to your visa interview. Again, check the instructions on your local embassy or consulate's website for if you need to bring a a passport photo to your visa interview. The DS 160 again may ask you to upload a passport photo, so it might be one of those documents you need to prepare in advance of filling out the DS 160 so that you have it ready for upload. But if for whatever reason you are not able to upload your passport photo as part of the DS 160, the consular officer will expect you to bring that passport photo with you when you interview. So again, check the website instructions for your local embassy or consulate. That's going to give you clarity on how you're going to get these documents to the consulate. You do want to bring your proof of funding documentation. This can be the same financial documentation that you submitted to our office to request your Form I-20 or DS 2019. And then you'll want to bring documentation of your home country address and any other ties to your home country that you can demonstrate evidentially with hard copy documents. Really important. I know I've mentioned it several times, but this is not an exhaustive list. These are known required documents. It is so important that you read the instructions on your specific embassy or consulate's website, as that consulate or embassy may require other documents or recommend that you bring additional documents in addition to the list that we just looked at. So please do make sure you are following their instructions. All right, so what to expect during your visa interview. If you don't already know, I suspect some of you may have done research about the visa interview, but the visa interview goes very quickly. 10 minutes tops is the maximum amount of time typically for a visa interview, but more often than not, you're gonna have maybe 2 to 5 minutes with the consular officer. It will go very quickly. So you want to be brief, maintain a positive attitude, and be ready to talk. The consular officer is going to expect to have a short conversation with you. They will ask you questions. You'll need to respond. Something that we see sometimes from students is you're bringing all this packet, right, of all these documents with you. You will want to be ready to provide those to the consular officer, but the documents cannot speak for you. The consular officer is going to want to talk to you, and the documents are there to support the information you share with them in your answer. So be ready to talk about your program of study, the degree program you've been admitted to, and how it connects to your long-term career or life goals. Be ready to talk about your sources of funding. So if you've been given a scholarship or a fellowship, let them know that. If you're being supported by a family member, you want to be ready to explain to the consular officer how and why that person's relationship to you, why they would support you financially. And you want to be ready to discuss ties to your home country. What I mean by this is, what evidence can you give the consular officer that supports your non-immigrant intent? In other words, what connections do you have back home that support that would support or encourage your ability to return home, or your intent to depart the United States after you are done with your program of study as an FRJ student? And then last but not least, of course, be prepared to have the entire conversation in English. So if you feel the need to practice how you talk about some of these things, it's a great idea to practice how you might respond to some of these topic areas, because you will be expected to have the entire conversation in English. All right. So there are 3 general outcomes to a visa interview. One, of course, is approval of your visa stamp. But I want to take a moment and talk about 2 common or known visa delays that students also sometimes run into. The first is known as administrative processing. Administrative processing is a special security clearance procedure where at the end of your visa interview, the consular officer might determine that they need more time to review your visa application. Administrative processing, unfortunately, is not a fast process. It can take up to 60 days or more. If your visa is refused for administrative processing, I want to call out that a visa refusal is not the same as a visa denial. A visa refusal typically means that the consular officer has refused approving your visa at that point in time because they need to collect or review additional information related to your visa application. If you do have your visa application placed in administrative processing, typically the consular officer is going to hand you a letter, not always, but often they do, that is known as a 221G letter that will specifically call out to you that your visa application has been refused for administrative processing. It is often also going to usually tell you what additional documents the consulate needs you to submit in order to continue their review of your visa application. So if you are refused for administrative processing, it's really important that you follow whatever instructions the consulate has given you to submit additional documentation. Sometimes they may ask you for additional documentation regarding your program of study. If that's the case, for example, that could be more information on your curriculum or your research plans, or maybe sometimes they look to see something like, we want to know more about your faculty advisor and the research they're doing. If you get a request for additional documents related to your program of study, please feel free to reach out to your academic department. You can also contact our office and we can help connect you with your department, because it's really important that you get the consulate the information they're asking for as quickly as possible so that they can move on with the review of your visa application. So again, if you are placed in administrative processing, please contact ISEO, our office. You can reach us at icontact.ucsd.edu. And I would encourage you, if possible, to stop by our online advising and speak to an ISEO student advisor so we can learn about your visa interview experience and provide guidance on next steps. And then, of course, the other type of visa delay that students can encounter is a visa denial. Visa denials are rare, but they do happen. In most cases, when a visa is denied, the consular officer will tell the person why. And in most cases, that person can reapply for a visa again. Now, a visa reapplication does mean filling out the DS-160 again and scheduling a new interview. So there can be a delay in terms of just finding a new appointment slot and having to go through the process again. If you do experience a visa denial, again, I would encourage you to stop by our online advising, reach out to us, icontact.ucsd.edu, and hopefully speak with an international student advisor so that we can learn about your visa interview experience and maybe provide some guidance on moving through the visa application process a second time. All right. So now that is step 3, attend your visa interview. Let's talk about the last step for today, at least, which is how do you receive your visa stamp and then plan your travel to the United States? All right, so at the completion of the visa application process, this could be you've gone for your interview and the consular officer right there says, okay, your visa is approved, or it could be at the completion of administrative processing. If your visa is initially refused for administrative processing, and then after the administrative processing process completes, it could be several weeks or months, unfortunately, sometimes later, the consulate will reach back out and indicate that, okay, your visa is now approved. the consulate is going to collect your passport. And it will typically take them 1 to 2 weeks to produce and affix on an inside page your actual F1 or J1 visa stamp. A couple things I want to call out here is it is okay and a good idea to ask the consulate when they collect your passport, how will you get it back? Some consulates will mail it back to you. Others will tell you you need to come pick it up. Others might give you the option. We can mail it. You can come pick it up. You'll want to find out regardless, how do I get my passport back? Also note that this means that you will be without your passport for this short period of time. So keep in mind if you are trying to make travel plans that whenever you have your visa interview scheduled for, assuming your visa interview is immediately successful and you are approved for the visa right there at the end of the interview, the consulate's going to take your passport. You will not have it for a few weeks. So don't plan any travel during that time that would require you to have your passport. Once you've gotten your passport back with your stamp, your visa stamp, you now have the documents that you need in order to seek entry to the United States. So what this means is that when you are going through customs, the documents you will be required to show will be your passport, valid for, again, at least 6 months after the program start date that's printed on your Form I-20 or DS 2019, your Form I-20 or DS 2019 printed and hand signed, and now your F1 or J1 visa stamp in your passport. Once you have these documents, you are ready to plan your travel to the United States. So I want to briefly just go through 3 reminders or things to be aware of when you're booking your travel to the US. We do strongly encourage that you wait to book your flight to the US until you have gotten your visa first. And the reason is because of what I just mentioned. Until you have those 3 required documents, your passport, your Form I-20 or DS 2019, and your F1 or J1 visa stamp, you will not be able to go through customs regardless. So it is a safe approach if possible. Sometimes we realize, especially if students have encountered a visa delay, you may not have the luxury of waiting until you get your visa to plan a flight, but as much as you can, we encourage you to hold off on putting money down on a flight until you have the documents that you know are going to be required to show to get into the US. As an F1 or J1 student, there is something that is called the 30-day entry rule, and this means that you cannot enter the US until you are within 30 days of your program start date, as it is listed on your Form I-20 or DS 2019. So when you're booking your travel, you want to make sure that the flight that you arrive to the US on, that the day you arrive to the US is going to fall within that 30-day window, which is known as your 30-day grace period. If you are an F1 student and you have been issued the Form I-20, you can look in the Program of Study information box on your Form I-20. As you see it here on the screen, there is actually a field called Earliest Admission Date. And this means the earliest date that you can be admitted to the United States. So look on your Form I-20 if you are an F1 student. And when you are planning your flight to the US, make sure that your flight does not arrive until on or after your earliest admission date. If you are a J1 student and you've been issued the Form DS 2019, your program start date is indicated as a from date under a box on your DS 2019, kind of in the middle as you see it on the screen there. That box is called Form Covers Period, and there's a from and to date. That is the start and end date of your program of study at UC San Diego. You'll need to do the calculation yourself to figure out what is 30 days in advance of the from date that I see on my DS 2019. Keep in mind that it's 30 days exactly, it's not a month. So I would recommend you use a date calculator, something you can just, Google date calculator online, put your program start date in that date calculator and ask it to calculate what is 30 days in advance of that date. That's how you'll know what your 30-day entry window is. All right. And then last but not least, when you are planning your travel to the US, it's important to know that the first place you arrive to the United States is called your US port of entry. This means it is the port or border where you are entering the US for the first time. At your U.S. port of entry, you will be required to go through customs to verify your SEVIS status. This takes a little bit of extra time. So if you are planning connecting flights, for example, we recommend that you allow at least 2 to 3 hours, and 3 hours is probably to be on the safer side, to go through customs. Customs is where you'll show those required documents. They're going to ask you a couple questions about your plans to attend UC San Diego. And especially if you've ever traveled internationally, you know that sometimes lines at customs get long. So again, if you are planning connecting flights, make sure you plan extra time around your first arrival to the US, because you're going to have to go through customs at that point. So for example, if you are flying to the US and your flight first arrives at New York, and then you take a connecting flight to Los Angeles, and then you take a connecting flight to San Diego, your US port of entry is going to be New York, and that is where you will go through customs to verify your SEVIS status as an FRJ student. So your time between when you arrive in New York and the connecting flight you take to Los Angeles, you want to make sure you allow extra time in New York there to go through customs. All right. So we've now gotten through the steps we're going to cover today in this webinar. And to wrap us up, I just want to show where you can find additional information on the things we've talked about today on our website. So quick recap. Our inewstudent.ucsd.edu website is your first go-to resource for all this information. As Grace mentioned earlier, I think most of you listening in on this webinar will navigate to inewstudent.ucsd.edu and choose graduate students, and you will see then these 3 steps. We have our visa application process as we've broken it down in this webinar. Steps 1, 2, and 3, you will find under step 1 of the inewstudent.ucsd.edu website. Step 4, which is you've gotten your visa stamp back, you can now plan your travel to the US, you'll find under step 2. And I encourage you to take a look at the step 2 information in more detail. We have helpful information on the Los Angeles International Airport, the San Diego International Airport, as well as how to get from both those airports to UC San Diego, which you may want to take into consideration when you start planning your travel. And then step 5 and 6, which is what to expect going through customs and the documents you'll need to have on you. And then step 6, the check-in process with our office once you get to the US. These steps are going to be obviously probably a couple months from now when you're actually arriving in the United States, but you'll find that information under step 3 on our inewstudent.ucsd.edu website.
All right, thank you so much, Jessica. We have many great questions already coming into the Q&A, which we'll get to shortly. But I'm just going to take a few brief moments to talk about ways you can already start to get engaged with our UC San Diego community. So our iEvents calendar is a one-stop shop for everything that's happening on our campus that is internationally or globally focused. So that has a really easy vanity URL to remember, ievents.ucsd.edu. And so you can start to kind of get a taste of both what's going on now, as well as what might be going on in the future when you arrive. iprograms.ucsd.edu features some of our signature programs. So these are reoccurring programs that take place over the course of an academic year or a quarter. And you can find out about each one of these by clicking on the different images. So you can find about the description, kind of what's involved, and then if possible, you can sign up for the different programs. So again, by visiting iprograms.ucsd.edu, you can learn more. And one program that I specifically want to highlight is our Grad Pals Peer Mentorship Program. So this matches our incoming international graduate students with current international graduate students at UC San Diego. I know that some of you are really curious about this and have already signed up to apply. Please note that we have taken account of your application, and we are currently in the process of recruiting more mentors to serve as different participants in the Grad Pals Peer Mentorship Program. So I'll go ahead and drop that link in the chat if you're interested in applying. And thank you for your patience as we work through our matching process. And then finally, you can engage with us on social media. So we are active across a variety of channels, including LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And so you can see the different handles here of ways to connect with us. Okay, now I'm going to talk about some additional resources before we move to our question and answer. So a few things to note, things that you can start doing now. So you can start applying for your visa document, as Jessica just went over, at iportal.ucsd.edu. The other thing that you can start doing now is applying for on-campus housing. So if you are interested in applying and living on campus, please go ahead and do so. You can visit hdh.ucsd.edu. It is competitive to live on campus, and so the sooner you can get your application in, typically the better. I'll go ahead and also include a URL specifically for the graduate family housing, and that would be a great resource for you all if you are a graduate student. Next, I do want to note that if you will begin your program, your graduate program prior to August 1st, the deadline to request your visa documents is May 1st. So if you are starting your program early, please do make sure that you submit your request for visa documents early as well. In July will be the deadline to submit health immunization requirements. Please note that we will actually have Student Health and Wellbeing join us at a later webinar, and that can serve more information. And then finally in September is when a lot of exciting things take place. Tuition is due, there's move-in, check-in, as well as orientation. So as a friendly reminder, you will most likely have orientation both for your academic department. So you would follow up with your academic department for those dates. And then we also host new international student orientation that our office, the International Services and Engagement Office, hosts. So it's very likely that you will be attending 2 orientations, if not more, during September. Okay, so here's a little sneak peek into some of our upcoming pre-revel webinars. This Thursday at 8:30 Pacific Daylight Time, we will have graduate student housing. So we'll actually have our colleagues from Housing, Dining, and Hospitality join us for this. So please attend if that's of interest to you. But in addition, we also will have some folks talk about off-campus housing and ways to start the off-campus housing search, even while you're still in your home country potentially, as well as different housing resources. Next Tuesday is when we'll feature student health and talk about insurance and immunization requirements. And next Thursday is also when we'll talk about graduate student funding. Then we'll take some time to talk about teaching assistantships and English language requirements. We'll talk about student life, getting involved on campus, finances, student accounts, CVIS transfers, and campus safety. So as a reminder, all webinars will be recorded and posted. I do know that there were some questions in the chat about when the webinar from last week will be posted. We are experiencing some technical difficulties, so it's not posted yet, but we are hopeful that will be hosted by the end of the week. So stay tuned for that. All right, so now is when we're going to move into our question and answer. So we have lots of great questions in the chat, and I want to, in some ways, turn it over to Jessica, as hopefully you've had a minute or two to look through the questions. I'm curious if there's any questions here that you would like to highlight as it might pertain to a large number of students.
Yes, so let's start with, I see some questions around the F2 visa. If you will be bringing a dependent with you, and as a reminder, a dependent is a dependent under the F or J visa categories if they are your legal spouse, meaning when you request your Form I-20 or DS 2019 from our office and you indicate you would like to bring your spouse, you will be required to upload proof of, I should say, documentation in the form of like a marriage certificate showing legal marriage, or a child who is under 21 years of age. So they cannot be 21 or older, and you will need to show proof of birth certificate. And as a reminder, when you're submitting those documents to our office, as with all documents you use or show or submit for the entire visa process, they have to be in English. So you may have to get them translated by a certified English translation service. When you request your Form I-20 or DS 2019 from our office, if you already know at that point in time that your dependents plan and hope to accompany you to the US at the same time that you are coming, then you will be able to indicate in iPortal that you have in that request that you would like to bring those dependents. We will then issue your Form I-20 or DS 2019 to include Form I-20s or DS 2019s for your dependents. And so your dependents will have their own visa certificate of eligibility document. They will need to apply for their own F2 visa stamp. They do not have to pay the SEVIS I-901 fee. So a different way to think about this is they will need to fill out their own DS-160 application, but they do not have to pay the SEVIS I-901 fee. If you are maybe still figuring out plans for your dependents, sometimes students know they have dependents, but they're going to come and join later. You can request their Form I-20 or DS 2019 from us at a later date, and then same thing, they will go through the visa interview process.
Wonderful.
One last thing actually I'll add about that is I do believe the DS-160, and we don't have a user view of this application. This is an application that's hosted by the US consulates, right? But my understanding from what students have told us is that there is a way at the end of the DS-160 that you can indicate a joint application. And so connect if your spouse has also submitted their DS-160, there's a way you can link those two applications together. When you're getting to that point, if you are having trouble finding that feature, or if you have questions around scheduling visa interviews kind of together so that you can go at the same time, those are good questions to pose to the consulate that you're applying at.
Wonderful. I'm seeing a few questions about logging into iPortal, and so I'm wondering if you can add some more information. The first question I'd like to start off with is confirming that students won't have access to iPortal until they accept their offer of admission. Is that correct, Jessica?
That is correct. So in order to log into iPortal, you need to have accepted your offer of admission. That's filling out that responding to that decision reply form that Mary talked about in your applicant portal. You need to have received your PID and set up your SSO student login. So that's going to require you to have your PID and your UCSD email set up, because that is the information you use to log into UCSD systems. As was mentioned earlier, it can take a couple business days for all those changes to sync. So if you are eager to get started on the visa process, but you haven't either accepted your offer of admission yet or set up your UCSD email or received your PID, you need to take care of those items first.
Wonderful. Okay, let's go ahead. I'll pause here, and I want to say, Mary and Shauna, are there any questions from your end that you're seeing as a common question that you'd like to address verbally?
I don't think so. Yeah, just reiterating what Jessica just shared, making sure that you're going back into your portal and actually filling out your decision reply form. That's a common, I think just in maybe the excitement of, seeing your admission decision, just you have to go in and make sure that you say yes to trigger some of these events that you need in order to do these important to-dos for your visa.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I've seen a few things coming up about housing. So just another reminder that our housing webinar is going to be in a couple days. So definitely come back and you'll be able to answer or ask your questions directly of our colleagues who work in graduate and family housing.
And another follow-up question about iPortal. Jessica, just to confirm, do students need to create a new account for logging into iPortal?
You should not need to create a new account. If you have completed those account setup tasks that we talked about earlier, you've accepted your admission, you've activated your UCSD email, you have your PID, an account will be created for you so that you should then be able to log into iPortal using your UC San Diego single sign-on credentials.
Great. We have a good question here. So what are some common documents for demonstrating home country ties?
This is a great question, and there is no list of common documents. This is going to be dependent on you feeling like what can you bring to prove that you have connections back home that would encourage or entice you to want to depart the US and go back home at the end of your program of study. Remember that the F1 and J1 visa categories are non-immigrant visa categories, which means that you are seeking a student visa to enter the United States for a specific purpose, which is to earn your degree at a US institution. That means that upon completion or finishing the reason that you entered the United States, you return home. And so the consulate is looking for anything that you can show to underscore or provide evidence that that is actually your intention, is to use your F1 or J1 visa stamp for the reason that it is issued, which is to be a student, and that then upon completion of that purpose, being a student, you will go home. So it really can vary. It is going to be different for every student. It's going to depend on what are your connections back home, what would make you want to go back home at the end of your program.
Great, thank you. There's another question here. Can I provide multiple bank statements showing a sum total of the amount needed for the Form I-20?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So you do not need to have the proof, you do not need to have all your funding in one account for the visa process. You can compile multiple sources of funding. However, the total amount that those sources amount to does need to meet or exceed the estimate as shown on our funding requirements webpage for your specific program.
Wonderful. There's a question here. If a student has made some updates regarding some of their personal information, how long will that take to be reflected in iPortal?
That is a good question. And I'm thinking of a couple different scenarios. If I'm understanding this to be, if you have made changes to your official UC San Diego student record, maybe changes to your name or your foreign address or anything that you initially submitted as part of your UC San Diego admission application, once you are once you've accepted your offer of admission, if you're needing to change anything like that, my understanding is it has to go through the registrar's office. Mary, correct me if I'm wrong. But it may take several business days for the registrar's office to be able to update your student record, and then a couple more business days for those changes to sync to iPortal. You do not need to wait for those changes to take effect in iPortal in order to request your Form I-20 or DS 2019, because the information you see in iPortal is pulled from your UC San Diego admission application. What we use to actually issue your Form I-20 or DS 2019 is going to be your passport and the other required documents you upload to your iPortal request. So if you're concerned that something's not showing exactly right on your iPortal profile, don't let that stop you from submitting your Form I-20 or DS 2019 request, because we will use your actual official legal documents, your passport, your funding statements, et cetera, to issue your Form I-20 or DS 2019.
Great. A follow-up question regarding iPortal. So if iPortal is asking for a US contact number, but I am an international student, what should I put in that field?
That's a good question. I'm not familiar with this particular feature, but if for whatever reason iPortal won't let you advance on a page without providing a US contact number, you can put our office's number for now. It is on our step 1 page at inewstudent.ucsd.edu. You also see it in front of you on the screen right here.
Great. We have a few questions regarding flying into different locations inside of the US
Mhm.
and then traveling to San Diego to start their program of study. So for one student, their relatives live on the East Coast. They're wondering if they can book their ticket there, stay for a couple weeks, and then travel to San Diego. Another student is asking about taking a flight to Los Angeles and then taking a bus to UC San Diego. Do you have any things to recommend or keep in mind if students are making these travel plans?
Yeah, so two things. One would be in terms of planning how to get from the airport to UC San Diego. Again, I really encourage you to go read through our step 2 page on our inewstudent.ucsd edu website. We have a lot of resources to different options for transportation that you can use to get from either LAX, the Los Angeles International Airport, or San Diego International Airport, from either airport to the UC San Diego campus. So you'll want to take some time looking through those options and seeing what might be best for you. In terms of traveling or planning travel around the United States prior to beginning your program of study, we talked about earlier that as an F1 or J1 student, you have a 30-day entry window. That is the 30 days immediately in advance of the program start date that is listed on your Form I-20 or DS 2019. This 30-day grace period is intended for you to have some buffer space to arrive to the US, get adjusted to the time change, start to settle in San Diego before you begin your classes, so that when your program of study begins, you are able to focus on your coursework and not still trying to kind of set up your life in the US, right? You are absolutely welcome to use that 30-day grace period to travel inside the United States. What you should not do is you cannot use that grace period to travel inside and outside the United States. In other words, once you have entered the US within that 30-day grace period, you need to stay in the United States until your program of study has begun and we have activated your F1 or J1 record. That is the check-in form that you have to submit to our office once you arrive to the US. So if you have relatives or friends, or you've just really wanted to always go to Las Vegas, once you have entered the United States and you're in your 30-day grace period, if you want to use that time to travel around the US, you can. Just please don't use it as a window to go back and forth outside of the US and back in.
Wonderful. I'm just going to touch on a couple last questions that I think will benefit a large group of students, and then we'll wrap up for today's webinar. So, Jessica, could you remind us what is the standard time for receiving an I-20?
Yes, so 15 business days is the amount of time it takes to process and issue a brand new Form I-20 or DS 2019. And that is 15 business days from when you successfully complete and submit your new admit request in iPortal. What I mean by complete and submit is a couple things. You definitely want to make sure that you review the instructions under step 1 on our inewstudent.ucsd website so that you know the information and specifically the documents that you will need to submit as part of that new admit request. If your application is incomplete, meaning you submitted it, but maybe the documents are not sufficient or there's information missing, when an international student advisor begins to review your request, they are going to set that request to incomplete. And that processing time, that 15-day processing time, that means has not started. So that 15-day processing time is from when your application is fully complete, meaning you have successfully given us the information you are required to in order for us to issue your documents. You also need to make sure your new admit form has been submitted. So when you are filling this form out in iPortal, you'll notice that you answer all the questions and the form automatically saves. You then need to navigate back to requests in the top menu, find your new admit request, upload the required documents and submit the request. Sometimes students don't realize that it's kind of a two-step. The form is going to save, then you have to go back and upload the documents required and then submit. So once you've successfully completed and submitted that request, it's 15 business days of processing time.
Lovely. Okay, last couple questions. Can you speak to, if a student is starting their program in September, when would you recommend to start the visa process?
Now, you can never start the visa process too early. If you're starting in June, start the visa process now. If you're starting in August, start the visa process now. If you're starting in September, start the visa process now. Best case scenario is that you begin the visa process right now and you're able to schedule an interview quickly. Maybe your consulate has appointment slots a couple weeks after you receive your Form I-20 or DS 2019, and you go for your interview. And sometimes students, if they're, diligent about getting into this process now, it can be May or June and they already have their visa stamp and they already know at that point, like, I've got the documents I need to come to the United States. Now I can spend the rest of my summer, figuring out my housing, learning about what I'm going to need to set up when I get to the US, et cetera. The other reason to begin it now is because, as we mentioned, more often than not, the visa process does result in approval, but there are delays that students can experience. And if you find yourself in a delay, it can really delay the amount of time and lengthen the amount of time that you will be waiting for your visa stamp. So in our opinion, you can never get started too early. And I saw that Mary unmuted. Did you want to add something, Mary?
Yeah, no, just wanted to emphasize there was a question about this, but we get a lot of questions about this in the spring. You do not need to complete your WES evaluation in order to start your visa process. So you are provisionally admitted right now. That is like more than enough to move forward. So do not wait to start your visa process until your WES evaluation is completed, because for many students that's difficult to do at this time if they're currently enrolled in a program or some other, it just can take a while sometimes to contact former institutions. So as Jessica said, like, jump on in and don't wait on finalizing your admission. That can come later.
All right, we'll end with this question. Does a program start date mean the start date of the semester or the day of orientation?
Oh, this is a great question. So your program start date can be based on one of a couple things. It is going to be dependent on when your graduate program has told us you are required to report to campus. So it's going to differ per program. The program start date can be based on a required orientation if that is the start date the department has reported to us. If you have been admitted to a graduate program that begins in the fall quarter, then we are required to issue your program start date and your start of classes date, which will both be printed on your Form I-20, to match the UC San Diego academic calendar. So you will see those dates reflect the start of the fall quarter and the start of fall classes. If you've been admitted to a program that requires you to begin your program of study in the summer, then your program start date and your start of classes date will reflect whatever those dates are as your graduate program has reported them to us. Regardless of what event or activity your program start date is aligned with, your program start date is the date that you are expected to be in San Diego and able to report to campus for the start of your program activities. So it's important that as you're planning your travel, you make sure that you've arrived to the US by your program start date.
Wonderful. Okay, so that is all of the time we have for questions today, but I do want to remind everyone that you can reach out to our office via icontact.ucsd.edu. There we have a contact form that we are diligently managing. You are also welcome to attend advising. There's a lot of different ways that you can get in contact with our office, and we're here to support you, as well as the Division of Graduate Education and Postdoctoral Affairs. So I want to thank you everyone for joining us today. I know that it might be the morning, the afternoon, the evening, the middle of the night where you are. So we definitely take note of that and appreciate your attendance and your engagement and your great questions. And we hope to connect with you soon, maybe seeing you later this week for our pre-arrival webinar on graduate student housing. But with that, take care and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.